Hey everybody, what's up and welcome to another week of the Illuminerdi's post-credits recap show, recapping all of your MCU material week to week. This one is called The Loki Lowdown. My name is Richard Nebens. I'm going to be your host for this episode, and we have yet another episode of Marvel Studios' third MCU Disney Plus show, Loki, to talk about. Now, where we last left off with the famous god of mischief, played by Tom Hiddleston, was he was escaping from Haven Hills, Alabama in 2050 at the end of episode 2 with the new version of what we think is Loki, played by Sophia DiMartino. He was escaping from the TVA. Owen Wilson was chasing after him before they jumped into a portal and escaped from Alabama, leaving the multiverse potentially in absolute chaos. And that is where we start off with episode 3, which is called Lamentis. And this is actually quite the interesting episode. Now, these Disney Plus shows have all varied in time lengths for the most part. WandaVision started off short and ended up getting longer, 45-minute episodes. Falcon Winter Soldier was mostly 40 to 50-minute episodes. Loki, so far, we have had a 51-minute episode and a 54-minute episode with about 45 and 48 minutes of screen time. This one was much, much shorter at only about 36 minutes of runtime for the actual action and a little over 40 in all. But we got some interesting stuff in this episode nonetheless. We start off with a really interesting scene where you can't quite figure it out at first, but we've got Lady Loki, Sophia DiMartino, talking to C20 from the last episode after she pretty much had her mind really screwed up with during episode 2, and we get Lady Loki talking to her in some kind of bar, having drinks and everything, and Lady Loki is trying to figure out what is going on with the Timekeepers, with the Time Variance Authority, and we find out that she's in a couple of different locations with C20, but she is completely in C20's head, touching her head, getting all up in her mind, and trying to get this information. So you could tell why the Time Variance Authority agent was so wonked out of her mind in episode 2 when we found her in Alabama. And then we get the opening credits, the opening logo and everything, and then we catch up with Loki chasing Lady Loki. They end up actually just going back to the TVA to start. That's where Lady Loki's been trying to get to, and she's, beating up agents, killing people as Loki's chasing her, trying to figure out what's going on. The two end up coming into contact with Renslayer as she's ready to basically eliminate both of them. And then they escape through another one of the portals to an unknown at first planet and time, which we find out is the planet is called Lamentis 1, and they travel to the year 2077. So about 50, 60 years in the future, even from where Loki first dropped off the map in 2012 after the Avengers. Now, Lamentis is actually from the comics a Kree planet, which we don't really get into a lot in this episode, but it's definitely an interesting callback to, the Kree. We've seen a ton in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise with Ronan, with Yondu. We saw it a little bit in Captain Marvel, so it'll be interesting to see if that ties off in any way to those franchises. But regardless, we get a really cool story going ahead with Loki and Lady Loki. Now, Loki ended up stealing one of the TemPads from episode 2 that Mobius and the TVA were using to travel through time and everything, and we finally find out that they're called TemPads. And then Lady Loki has to try to find something to power it, so she and Loki can try to get back to whatever time and place they need to get to. Now, to do this, they try to find this giant ship that's leaving from Lamentis 1 because they end up coming to what is said to be one of the biggest apocalypses in world and universe history. And Loki had figured out that the variant was going to different apocalypses all throughout time and space in the last episode. And this looks to be one of the worst ones of all on Lamentis 1, where a moon is about to crash into this planet and destroy everything in its vicinity. Now, Loki and Sylvie sneak onto this ark that's leaving the planet where they're going to try to find a power source for the TemPad to recharge it. they find a way to sneak on, get into a nice compartment, have some drinks, get into some conversation with each other. It's mostly Loki just kind of talking about himself because, as Sylvie mentions through the entire episode, by the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned, we realize her name is Sylvie, as was mentioned in the credits of the last episode, Sylvie Laufey daughter. We only get her first name, but that's what she's called. So we get Loki and Sylvie talking mostly about Loki's life. He reminisces on his mother teaching him magic, reminiscing on how he was an Asgardian, grew up a prince, couldn't really find love, and they were debating about what love is. They got into this whole discussion. Loki actually kind of said it beautifully in a way about how love's a dagger and all this other metaphor stuff. And Sylvie was just like, that sounds really, really stupid. And just kind of shot him down and got a big old laugh at everybody, especially us watching on the watch along just now. But anyway, we get a lot more information on Loki. We hear him singing as Guardian, which is pretty cool, after he gets drunk and just goes crazy on the train. We get a big old fight scene between Sylvie, Loki, and the train guards before they have to jump out the window to try to escape with their lives. In this, Loki ends up breaking the tempad, of course, because what could go right in Loki for either him or Sylvie? And then they look ahead to this big city that they're trying to get to still find a way to escape. And then this is where the really, really interesting revelation comes in. Sylvie and Loki start talking about the Time Variance Authority, and we've pretty much all known the Time Variance Authority has been super sketch pretty much since the beginning when they first picked up Loki out of the Gobi Desert. And Sylvie reveals that everybody in the Time Variance Authority is some kind of variant in and of themselves, just like Loki is and just like she is. Now, it'll be interesting to find out how exactly that works, because it seems like what they do is they pluck out these guys probably who try to do something with Infinity Stones, since there's so many of them at the TVA, as seen in episode 1. So they probably take these people who try to do stuff with Infinity Stones, just like Loki did when he escaped from Stark Tower with Tesseract, and then they just make up TVA agents and pretty much wipe their minds and make them forget completely about who they were. It's some really, really shady stuff, and I can't wait to see what they do in the next few episodes with that. But anyways, they go to this city on Lamentis, which kind of looks like a whole combination of like Madripoor and Sakaar and Nowhere kind of mixed all into one from a bunch of different Marvel franchises. And then what ends up happening is this giant ship that they're trying to get to ends up being destroyed, ends up crushed, really, and Loki and Sylvie are pretty much just looking at it like, what the hell are we going to do next? And that is where the episode ends. I mean, we have no idea what's happening next. Now, this episode really took a moment to focus largely on Loki and Sylvie. They carried this episode from start to finish. We got maybe a couple minutes of Renslayer and only a couple minutes really of everybody else, besides that C20 scene with Sylvie in the very beginning. So I'm really interested to see what happens next week, now that the multiverse is completely in shambles, if that's really the case, because we have no idea what we can trust from the TVA going forward. But we have a crazy second half of this season to catch up on. We've been through 3 episodes. There's 3 more, and there is so much to get into for the second half of Marvel Studios Loki. Thank you guys again so much for joining me. It's been a blast bringing you all the info on this episode that I can, and I can't wait to be back with you guys for episode 4 next week of Loki. You can catch me on It's All Connected this coming Sunday. You can also catch me on the Marvel Watch Along next week for episode 4 of Loki, like I mentioned. And I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and I can't wait to talk to you guys more about episode 4 when it comes next week. This has been the Illuminerdi's post-credits MCU recap show. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at @RNebens. Be sure to follow the Illuminerdi on all of our social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Marvel Studios Loki. Thank you so much.